I'm here today to talk about a really awesome lens. And yes, I know a lot of you guys have probably heard all of the hype of the brilliant Sigma f2 sports lens. It is a phenomenal lens and there's been a dozen reviews on them. So what I'm going to do today is a little bit different. What you're seeing right now is a recording of me with the 135mm Sigma 1.8. But I've got a little bit more of a special treat, a little bit more of a different review today. And it is the father of 200mm f2 lenses. This is a lens that you're probably not going to find an official review for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox it in front of you. Yes, unbox, that sounds crazy. And I'm going to show you everything there is to the 200mm f2 AIS Nikon lens. That's right, Nikon lens. And we're going to dive into that in a moment. And we're going to talk about this lens and a little bit about the history. So see you there. Okay, so a little bit about the history of the first ever 200mm f2 lens. It was actually produced in 1977 and there was only, I think, 37 of them ever made. And it was actually made, and you won't believe this is going to sound very crazy, it was actually made for sports photographers at the Olympics. They wanted a very fast lens that would actually be used indoors in the indoor arenas. So they were looking for a fast lens. And this is where the 200mm f2 lens was actually born. And I just thought about this. I've got a serial number on here. And when I checked it out, this was from the 1980s, this particular one. So the very first set was released in January 1977. And there was a total production of 37, which ranged from that January all the way through to April. 37 lucky photographers back in 1977 had the opportunity to actually shoot with this iconic lens. And yes, sports and manual, that is absolutely mental. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox this for you guys. And we'll have a look at the optics, we'll have a look at the build quality and everything else behind it. So I'm going to go and sit down and open this up for you. The first thing that you'll notice is, of course, this is the era when they actually showed a little bit of pride and things came in solid boxes. So this is really solid. And if I turn it around here, you'll notice that it's almost like a toolbox, to be fair. So you unclip it here like that, and you unclip it here, and you can see it's all metal over here. And we open it up and there is this beautiful lens. So this is the 200mm f2 lens in all its glory. Look at that. Now you can also open a little box over here, and this version actually came in with a little Ray-Ban lens cleaner. Okay, obviously it's not Ray-Ban, it's Nikon, but the box is lockable. So we've got these little keys over here, and we've got the cover over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off the cover, and you can see that we've got the matching colors inside here. Shows a lot of pride in the product. And we have the lens hood over here. This is the actual size of it without the lens hood. And you can see that the lens hood over here is actually designed with a little bit of felt in the inside here that absorbs light. So it is a very wide lens hood, and you snap it on like this over here, and you screw it in over there, and that holds it in place. But you can see here how big that lens element there is. That's a 122mm filter that goes on the front of that. So that's pretty big. Over here, you can see that we've got the filter. Now, this isn't a very typical thing on most lenses. And what you do here is you pull this out and you've got a little drop-in filter that goes on the inside there. So you can cut back light. If you're shooting in very bright scenes with a very fast aperture, you're going to need to cut back the light. So instead of trying to do it at camera level, you put this ND filter, drop-in filter that cuts back light. You can see here how beautiful the build quality is. It's all metal. Over here, we've got an adjustable collar. So we undo the collar over here and you can turn it the way you want it. And that's obviously to go on the tripod. There we go. And we lock that in place. And you'll notice something else that they've added onto this is the little ears over here for the strap. So if you want to have the lens hanging on your neck, not by the camera, but by a strap on the lens, that's a nice safe way to work with this lens. Now over here, we have the aperture ring, which is right at the back over here, if you can see that. So all the way from f2 all the way to f22, so you can really open up or narrow the aperture. But that f2 gives you that lovely depth of field, that beautiful bokeh that you see in a lot of the images that I share. So this here is built like a tank. It weighs 2.5 kilograms, which I think in pounds is 5.5 pounds. So it is a very heavy lens. You've got to have it really sturdy in your hands. And there's certain techniques that I use to stabilize this lens. And in the tutorials, you'll hear me talk about this quite often. And that is shooting 2 times the focal length in terms of shutter speed. So the minimum shutter speed that I'm using with this heavy lens is 1/400th of a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it to my camera so you can see what it looks like on my Nikon D750. But there you have it. It's a beautiful specimen. It's the later version. This particular version was from the 80s. I actually looked at this on the internet with the serial numbers. What I'll do is we'll go back to the studio in a couple of minutes and we'll look at the results that you can achieve with this lens, and we'll look at some of the serial number history on this particular lens so we'll know exactly when it was produced. I think there was only 1,000 of them produced, but we'll have a look at that. There's an official site with other Nikon lenses that you can actually have a look at the history of with the serial numbers. So that's also pretty cool. So we'll put this on the camera in a moment and you can have a look at what it looks like there. Let's mount this on the Nikon D750. We'll just pop it into place like that. And one of the things that I did do earlier was move the tripod collar. You can see that we've got a little mark over here and a little mark over there that you inline so that you know that the tripod mount is in the right place. And of course, now we've added that extra weight on, and I think we're probably closer to the 3 kilogram mark, which is about 6 pounds. So it is a very heavy lens. It's not for everybody. So if you're petite, this is probably not the lens that you're going to want to shoot with all day long. Now, I've gotten very used to this lens and I've got certain ways that I do handle it. One of the things that I want to mention here, of course, is the focusing. All right, this is a manual focus lens, of course. The lens focusing is so easy that I can move the focusing with my pinky over here, which is a bonus. That is very, very loose. And that is one of the traits of many manual lenses from that era, because that was very easy to move. So if you needed that precision, you could very easily dial in the focusing. Can you imagine trying to do sports with a manual focus now? It's crazy. But guys were doing it. They were doing sporting events. They were doing press events with this lens because it was so good in low light. So that's one of the reasons that I got this lens, not because of that speed, but because of the depth of field that we can get from that. Now, just showing you some of the things that I do in terms of keeping this heavy lens stable. You can, of course, use your original strap and just strap it to the lens, but I don't work like that. I freely handle it just like this. But I've got a very particular way that I actually hold this lens, and it's always from the bottom here, and I lock in my elbows over there. So when I shoot with it, everything is stable. Or very often I'll get down to a lower position like this over here, and I'll keep it stabilized right here. Because of its weight, you want to have this lens stable because any kind of little motion gets exaggerated because of that focal length. But this is generally how I handle it. So my pinky finger is right on the top here, and I'm just moving that focus. Now inside the camera, however, you've got a little confirmation dot. On the Nikon cameras, you've got a little confirmation dot that appears. You don't see it over here, but you can move the barrel left and right until you get it centralized into your focus point, and the little dot appears. It's like a little green dot, and that will confirm that the focus is there. But this is a lens that was introduced to me in 2017, and I've fallen heavily in love with it since then, and I use it very often. And you guys who might not be in my membership will be able to actually have that experience of what it's like to shoot with this lens. You'll see me work with it behind the scenes with Amy. You'll see all of those results in camera. There's a lot inside the membership that you can dive into, but it's all there for you to enjoy. So we'll head back to the studio and we'll have a look at the results that one gets from this lens, and we'll talk a little bit more about the experience. So we'll see you there.
Right, we are now back in the studio, and what I wanted to do is just show you guys this website where I found this information with regards to serial numbers and production dates. This is photosynthesis.co.nz, and as we scroll down here, we've got the 200mm range, and as you can see, we've got the AI version, the very first ever 200 f2 prime lens produced in January 1977, and 37 were made. And those 37 that they did make went straight out to these professional photographers to capture these indoor events at the Olympic Games. And can you imagine trying to capture sports in motion with a manual focus lens? Folks back then had the gift and had the skills and talents to be able to do this. And that was the difference between them then having manual focus lenses compared to now, where everything's automated with autofocus and giving us this brilliant sharp results all the time. After the set, they produced another AI version set, and obviously based on the success of those first 37, they produced 1,230 of them, and then subsequently 660. You can see that these short bursts, it's not a huge amount, to be fair. And then you can see the version AIS over here, the one that I currently own with the new cosmetics and the gel holder. My serial number falls in between this here somewhere, so it's probably roughly 1990 maybe, but you can see that they had a production run of 1,813, and it was between 1986 and 2005. Now I can kick my butt because I owned one of those first 37 that were produced. And I'm so angry I got rid of it. I only found out afterwards, and I was thoroughly disappointed. But that's why it drove me to go and find another manual focus one. But I landed up with a version that had slightly better optics and the newer cosmetics. The old version had the push-pull hood on it, not this detachable hood. You would have seen me actually talk about that in some of the classes where you saw me working with that lens. Anyway, let's go and have a look at the results. Now, this goes back to the autumn shoot that we had with Amy in 2024, and I shared these images in a masterclass on the platform. So we'll have a look at the results here. When we zoom in, you can see that it's not technically absolutely pin sharp, but this can be expected with a lens of this caliber and this age, and also, of course, my skills of manual focusing. So it may not be perfect all the time, but look at those results. Beyond that soft haze, you can still see that there's beautiful sharpness. And in this case here, I was shooting at 1/500th of a second at f2 with an ISO of 400. And this is out of camera results. I've not touched them. I'm shooting in natural light here, and this is the results that we're getting. I think this one over here, I've actually edited slightly. You can see here that I've played around with my sliders, but if we reset the image over here, I'll be able to demonstrate what it looks like out of camera. I'll reset that there, and boom. Look at that. It's just stunning. And this is the type of rendering quality you can expect from this lens. And with the newer optics, when I compare this newer optic version to the very first one, which I got rid of, the optics on that one had a lot of chromatic aberration, whilst this one doesn't. And this is a good example of this, because when I zoom into the bright hair strands over here, I don't actually see any particular chromatic aberration, that purple fringing or green fringing. Maybe on the edges over here, it's very, very light. So they definitely improved the optics of this particular version of the lens. We can see here that at this distance over here, it's really nice and sharp. But let me tell you this, it is a challenge to focus, but you've got to get used to it. If you do eventually get this lens, you have to practice with it. You have to know the nuances of it. You've got to know exactly how this lens reacts in the different lighting conditions. But one of the things that I have to say here is that you have to shoot this lens at the 2 times focal length shutter speed. So in other words, if it's 200, you got to times that by 2, and you've got to have a minimum shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. I always play it safe with this one here. In static shots, I go 1/500th of a second, and then I might increase the ISO to achieve that shutter speed. But you can see even at this distance here, it's got this beautiful rendition. It's not overly sharp. If I compare to the 135 1.8 Sigma Art, it would be pin sharp. It's almost too sharp. I like this lens because it's got this soft character to it. It's not hyper sharp, obviously, for its age. And you can see here actually that my skill was diminished there in terms of the focusing. You can see that I missed focus just a little bit, and that's something else that I have to state right now. It's a long focal length and a wide aperture, but you got to be very, very precise with your focusing. And the one thing that I do love about the lens is the looseness of the focusing barrel. It's there, it's responsive. So if you are a little bit out, you can tweak it just a little bit. Let's scroll through these. It's just absolutely incredible, this lens. Now, there you can see the softness coming through, and that's probably because I missed the focus just a tiny little bit. But the depth of field is incredible. It's totally magical. And when we scroll through here, and you compare it to a newer lens like the 105mm VR, it's all this technical stuff. You can see that there's obviously the sharpness is there. Over here, you can see the sharpness is there. So compared to the newer lenses, obviously the age is showing here. But that said, if I zoom in here, compared to that 105 f2.8, there is a sensation of sharpness over here. It's still soft, but it's got beautiful character to it. Now there you can see that I missed the focus a little bit, and that's down to my skills essentially. Over here, let's zoom in. I'm a little bit soft there again. So yes, there's going to be those that don't pass the grade, and then those that do, that are nice and sharp. If we look at this one over here, it's a little bit soft. But the beauty of today's technology is that you can go in and sharpen these images to your heart's content. Look, there we go. Brought it back straight away. But you know, you're not buying this lens for this ultimate sharpness. You're buying it for that depth of field and that character to it. It's not overly sharp, like I said. And this creates this beautiful finish to the portraits. And over the years that I've been shooting this lens, I've gotten used to its nuances, and I do shoot a little bit more than I do with other lenses, but it's a beautiful bit of kit to work with. It's not for everybody because of that weight that I mentioned, but if you do decide to invest in one of these lenses, you're going to expect to pay around the $1,000 to $1,500 mark. That's at least from where I've been getting them from. The mileage might might vary depending on where you are in the world, but I got my first copy for around about the $1,000 mark. And yes, it's not extremely cheap, but it's also not extremely expensive for a 200 f2 of this caliber, especially considering the fact that the newer 200 VR2 lenses are around the 5K mark. So yes, they are much more expensive, but if you ever get the chance to lay your hands on a manual focus version, check that serial range, because you might actually have one of those 37 that got first released, and it'll be a definite collector's item based on that serial number. So there you have it, my friends. This was a review, the very first official review that you're ever going to find on the 200 f2, and I'm very proud to present it to you guys because it's been on the cards for a very long time, and I wanted to talk about this lens because nobody else is, and I do believe that it deserves its place on YouTube and other places you might find this video, because it really is an iconic lens. And although it was initially designed for sports, you can clearly see that it makes for a beautiful portrait lens. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for the amazing support. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, hit that bell so you can get notifications when I release the videos, and we'll see you in the next session. Cheers for now.